So it started out as the Francisco family cemetery. It was a family cemetery. And when we say Francisco, we really mean Cisco as well. A lot of the Franciscos dropped the first part and are known today as just the Cisco family, which there are many, many here in Butler and Bloomingdale in the area. So that was back probably before the Revolutionary War. I say 1808 because that's the latest one that we have marked. When we get down to the old section, you'll see there are stones here and stones here. And it's completely empty in the middle. And we're convinced that that middle section had many graves. Maybe they had a wooden marker, or a lot of people couldn't afford a marker. You had to be pretty wealthy to have a marker at that time. So we know there are a lot of unmarked graves down there in the middle section, which probably are before 1808.
Hello, everyone. My mother was so pleased to get wonderful news. It was 1930, the start of the Great Depression, and even though she was at the advanced age of 35 years old, she found that she was expecting a child. And sure enough, I was born. And my parents were so happy to have me, even though I was born with a lot of special needs. My brain never fully developed, and I lived my life pretty much thinking like a child the whole time. As I got older, I never really matured, but I was happily living at home in Bloomingdale with my parents, Harry and Catherine. Now it's the 1970s. Harry, my father, passed away in 1973, leaving my mother very sad and growing older. She felt so sad that she couldn't do all the household chores, so she trained me to do some of the cooking and the cleaning, and that turned out to be a big mistake. In 1978, I was cooking at the stove when my apron caught fire, and I couldn't tell what was happening, but I knew I felt funny. So I went into the living room and took a seat in my favorite rocker, rocking back and forth. Well, my mother, Catherine, smelled something funny. She thought she smelled smoke and came down into the living room, and the sight that she saw alarmed her. She came over and tried to put my apron out with her bare hands, to no avail. I passed away that fateful day in 1978. My mother lived one more year and finally died of both a broken heart and of badly burned hands, of which never fully recovered.
So as a young man, I signed up to get a job at the railroad, and instead, I got signed up for the Civil War. Now, I fought plenty of battles. I was all through Virginia, Washington, D.C. I was able to finish and come out with any scrapes, maybe a couple nicks and bruises, but nothing major. So I survived the war, and I signed up to get a job with the railroad. And I spent the next 10 years on the railroad, working long hours. And my favorite thing to do when I was done working was to go fishing every night. So one night, the wife and I, we get into it a little bit. I'm drinking. She kicks me out of the house. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I said, you know what? I'm going fishing at my favorite spot to help clear my mind. So I'm walking along the train tracks, and at some point, I must have fell asleep, or the booze kicked in, and I passed out on the train tracks. And that night, we had a couple freight trains coming through. The next morning, they found my body about a mile down the tracks, but it was in pieces. So for miles and miles, they found an arm, they would find a leg. They finally put me all back together and tried to give me a proper burial. Now, my wife and kids had lived in Butler, and they're buried here, but my body is not here. It was buried up in Stockholm, New Jersey. So I reside up there. I don't know why they moved me, but the wife and family's here. And
Yep, Mary Catherine Carr. Better known as Aunt Mamie, to all of my nieces and nephews. And I was born in 1868, and I was always considered a woman before my time. I never married, I never had kids, and I worked my whole life as a fashion designer. I used to travel all around, had my chauffeur, and later in life I started working in women's prisons, teaching women how to sew. unfortunately, in 1955, my life came to a tragic end. I was always in the habit of spending my late nights listening to the radio. One night I struck the match so I could see the radio dial, adjust it. I dropped the match and it ended up setting my whole robe ablaze. I ran out to the street. Some bystanders attempted to help, but unfortunately they were not able to save me. And in this plot, I'm buried with my father and my brother, who you'll hear more about in just a moment.
So I was pretty much a reckless hunter alongside my brother. We would hunt animals all day using our old shotgun from our family. And I came to a very early, unexpected tragic end to where my brother and I, we started arguing over the family shotgun, who wanted to use it to hunt down a deer or something. And little did I know that he would be the biggest headache of my life. Or before, like for a split second before, he struck me in the head with a gun accidentally, killing me at 15 years old.
Yeah, I'm Levi Brown. Civil War. I mustered in on the 33rd. Did anybody know what mustard means? When you mustered into the military?
That's when you put it on the hot dog, right?
It's a hot dog, right? You do a hot dog? That means you're joining up. You've either either signed up or you mustered in. Same way when you've done your tour of duty, you mustered out. And that term is really only used in military. Haven't seen it used in any other term. I was in a lot of major battles. I was in the Western Theater, where we're at the New Jersey 33rd, as you can see on my stone, along with Martin Cook, who you saw earlier. He was one of the veterans in the regiment. He served in his regiment. Then he mustered out, and then he felt compelled, the Civil War still going on, to join with the 33rd. 33rd was made up of people, Wanacue, West Milford, Butler, Bloomingdale. Bloomingdale at the time, there was no Butler, but they were major. I was one of the recent, 85% of the brigade was veterans. So I was one of the young pups coming in and joining up.
The engineer drove the train. He was the driver at that time period of a steam engine. The conductor, he was the boss on the train. And you had a brakeman. The brakeman was the guy who applied the brakes. That was the most hazardous duty you can have. Now, a lot of times, if you knew a brakeman, if you waved hello to you, you have two fingers. He lost his fingers because of his job so hazardous. Back in that day,